Hey guys, Felipe here. How's it going? So trying to kind of wanted to go over the housing market, kind of share my thoughts of what is going on. Um, yeah, inventory's low. Yeah, prices are all-time highs, literally all-time highs. Um, Not just in the United States, across the globe, literally across the globe. So, for the most part, the whole world is practically in a bubble for the same reason that every country is, right? Central banks or whatnot, they're just printing money and lowering rates. It's pretty much what every other country is doing nowadays. So kind of explains the extreme valuations. Especially since this has been going on since, I don't know, forever, pretty much. uh, so yeah, Federal Reserve advised they're gonna raise rates. They have somewhat already raised them. I think they're like somewhere in the low threes. So they're definitely already working on that. However, rates are still negative based on when you factor in inflation and whatnot. Real rates are technically negative. So I'm just curious if they're going to raise interest rates into a positive territory, and how that would affect an over leverage system. And a lot of people are saying the Federal Reserve is not going to raise rates. So, the housing market is safe, the stock market is safe. Federal Reserve's not going to raise rates. I tell you what, they don't have a choice, being as, the long-term government bond was 16% in 1980s. We're negative currently. Like, when you factor in inflation, technically they're negative. I'm going to tell you why they're going to have to raise rates, regardless of whether they don't want to, because I believe they don't want to, because that's how you keep the bubble going, right? They have increased the wealth gap so dramatically that at some point, if they don't get this into control, majority of the population is not going to be able to afford any kind of means of living standards or whatnot. Look at rent prices, look at food prices. So they're leading the economy or the population into the possibility of some kind of civil war, or I mean, you kind of see how messed up it is just already by looking at the news, all the riots that are going on and whatnot. I mean, it kind of starts off that way at first if you look at history. So basically, of course, the 10%, 1%, the ones that enjoy the wealth are good and whatnot. But the vast majority of the population suffers. What happens, your job or whatever, or you can't afford cost of living. You can't pay your rent. Just walk outside the streets. How many homeless people are you seeing these days? Look at LA, the videos of, come to Seattle, there's tents in every other corner. The homeless situation's out of control because the wealth gap has gotten out of control, and it's something the Federal Reserve has never, or central banks have never taken into consideration. And all great nations, or all great empires, come to an end via some kind of internal conflict, which begins to spark change, because majority of the population is in a way mistreated, I guess, because they can't afford the basic necessities of life, such as food. So if you look at the CPI, food and energy are through the roof. They haven't been this high in God knows when, So Federal Reserve has no choice. They have to raise rates. Or on the other hand, start planning or expecting some kind of civil disturbance at some point in the future, because that's what they're leading to. And raising rates, if they go positive in terms of where now you will actually make a return off of a government bond instead of make negative returns, because when you factor in inflation, when you buy a government bond, you make no money. You make negative return on your money. That's why everyone's in the stock market and everyone's in, looking for other safe havens and whatnot. So you ask yourself this: government bonds, or bonds which are in reality debt. They're the debt system. They're used to fund everything in reality, are negative. I get it. People become complacent. Easy money is good and all whatnot. Over leverage, but there's historically way too much leverage in the system, and this includes the housing market. Way too much leverage. So come the next economic downturn, where the Federal Reserve already has rates at negative, what would they do to save the economy again? I don't. They're gonna weigh one side, increase the wealth gap, and cause some possible civil disturbance in the future because of that huge wealth gap and people suffering because they can't meet standards for living. Basic necessities: roof, shelter, healthcare, food. Or raised rates kind of crash the system and balance everything out. So I'm leaning towards they have no choice. They got to raise rates. They have no choice. And that's going to bring a big shock into the equity markets. That's going to bring a big shock into the housing market. That's going to bring a big shock into the stock market. That's going to bring a big shock into all the speculative vehicles, such as cryptocurrency, the NFTs and whatnot, which are primarily purchased, or a lot of them are purchased via leverage, which now that cheap money would no longer be accessible in the case that the Federal Reserve raises rates. So let me put this into perspective, because a lot of people become complacent. And then again, this is just my opinion. I'm an idiot. What do I know, right? I have a buddy. He purchased a home in 2007. We all know from now, looking back in history, that was pretty much almost the peak of the housing market. So this is just to kind of put in a way, luck and market, and when you enter the market, how it may affect you in the future, right? He bought in mid 2007 his home. He has yet to break even as of to this date after the 2008 crash. I'm not saying that factors in for everyone, because it all depends on location and all this whatnot, values, right? But just to give you a perspective, depending on sometimes, which in the most part is luck, when you enter the market can affect how long you'll be stuck in the market, in terms of whether you break even or even make money, or see any return on your investment to begin with. So theoretically, if we are at the tipping point of a major cycle, the end of a major cycle, which again, people become complacent, they only see things one way, but look at the other way, look at the other opinion, as I always like to look at both, at all kinds of perspectives, because Every perspective has a good viewpoint, right? Saying that this is possibly, and it's looking like, the greatest bubble in history, right? And you enter now, and then we enter into a downturn. How long will it be for you to get a return on that investment? You might have equity now, you might have this and that now, but if things take a turn for the worse, which eventually they always do, because as they say, history rhymes, you're in for the long haul. So just something to think about. And my opinion, I just wanted to share that because I feel like we're, at some point in the future, unfortunately, coming into hard times. And I feel like the system's going to crack. It's already very fragile as it is. The housing market is going to crash. The stock market is going to crash. Everything's going to decline. It's a natural business cycle. Although we've kind of accelerated and made it worse in terms of, but we'll see what happens, right? All right, guys, thank you. Hit me with a like and a subscribe. Of course, you're welcome not to if you don't want to. And talk to you soon.